Welcome to NovoEdTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the NovoEdTalks podcast. Today, we are joined by Emma McCall, the Global Learning and Development Leader at Honeywell. My name is Melissa Fisk. I am the producer of the NovoEdTalks podcast. And today, Emma is going to be calling on her career to date, which has included every aspect of the learning and development process, including performing learning needs, analyses, designing trainings, creating and curating materials, establishing and managing budgets, and carrying out full evaluations and assessments. So she has the absolute gamut of experience to pull from and is going to share with us some awesome information. I will turn it over to you, Emma. Why don't you start by introducing yourself, your role, your company, and getting a little bit more into kind of what you're currently doing at Honeywell.
Yeah, absolutely. And hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to chatting about something rather than the everyday work as well. So yes, I lead the learning and enablement team within Honeywell, and specifically for one of the divisions, which is the building automation. We have the very good fortune of looking after the sales teams within this particular division. So we have quite a focused audience, and we get to understand that function really well. So I have a team of there's 7 of us all together that have slightly different roles within the team because we focus very heavily on the onboarding for the new sellers, also as well as the general learning and enablement for the more tenured sellers.
Wow. So you kind of talked a little bit about that, and that is nice that you have that focus group, but talk a little bit more about who are your learners and like what some of their biggest challenges are.
Yeah. So our group we have approximately 2,000 sellers and about 350 sales leaders. So that's quite a large, population to deal with. And as I mentioned before, really their needs first start when they join the company, and we look after them from an onboarding perspective. We have a very rigorous program for new sellers to take them through. It's a 6-week program where we handhold them basically on a one-to-one basis. We provide a white glove service for them to help them navigate those first few months within the Honeywell organization, because it's large and it's complex. So there's a lot for them to learn. And then really once they've got through that part, it's just a question of looking at both from a global perspective, what's coming down as main learning initiatives and global programs. And then from the bottom up is looking at any specific needs on an individual level, if we can do that. But obviously we would look at on a group level, could be country-based, could be specific function-based within the selling organization. And then we obviously try to align all of those as well to make sure that we're trying to cover as much as possible.
Yeah, wow, that's great. And certainly, I'm sure a challenge, especially when you're getting down to the individual level with that many folks there. Is that one of your challenges? What are some of your biggest challenges, I guess, with the program in general, and how do you approach them? Like, if you want to even talk about that example, you can, but feel free to move on, whether it's, understanding from the individual to group to the whole spectrum, or any, kind of challenges that you find to be some of the most challenging, I guess.
I think if we look at it from both top down and bottom up. From the top down, when we think about the global programs, quite often the sellers may not have been involved in that journey as to why we specifically wanted to implement that program. So it does make that a little bit more challenging because we have to sell it to them. We have to raise the awareness within the actual organization. It's the comm side of things and the change management, to be honest, more than anything. And then, of course, the whole, when you're talking about implementing global programs to, 2,400 sellers, including the sales leaders, then that comes with its own problems logistically. But, that's something we can work out with good program management. It's more about, getting them along on the journey and their buy-in and having them understand why we would want to be doing this. When it comes from the bottom, bottom level and then going up to kind of top level, it's far easier because they've identified a need or their sales manager has identified a need, and therefore there's more motivation. Yeah, there's more kind of wanting to improve themselves. Or see better results, etc. So that's a far easier ride to do that one.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's such a good point. Like getting people to buy into anything is always like one of the biggest challenges, right? So that's awesome. And how do you kind of approach some of those challenges, like with getting folks to buy in, for example, like how do you get people to buy into the programs or why you're doing it?
We do. We try to do briefing sessions and education sessions about education programs, right? So there's the only way to do that is it's laborious, it's heavy lifting, but you cannot just send a mail out and expect people to, A, read it, B, digest it and understand the implications of it, and then C, be on board with you. So the only way to do it is literally, to take them through it step by step, is to have a very structured communication plan around it. Which it includes, of course, again, coming down from leadership, and then doing, introductions via short calls, via short meetings, and then keeping the regular drumbeat of communication about it and trying to raise a profile and doing some fun stuff around it as well. So that's the only way that we can get that fully to be effective.
Yeah, that's great. With the rise of remote work and virtual collaboration, how has your approach to learning and development adapted to ensure that employees are equipped with the necessary skills for the digital workforce?
Wow. Well, I think I'd love to say that we have this great strategic approach, and that we've done all of these great changes, based on that. But the truth is that, we really haven't. I think when COVID hit, we all adapted really quickly, and because we had to. Right. There was no other way to be, right? So we went from, being able to do some face-to-face classes to that being a complete non-starter, and of course not being able to do that. And then from a leadership perspective, they realized what could be accomplished virtually, which is a double-edged sword, because when we have, bounced back after COVID, some of that attitude is still around, is, oh, if we manage to do all the training virtually, through COVID, why can't we continue with that? Whereas we know that there are certain things that are just far better classroom taught or far better face to face. Even if it's not in a traditional classroom, that social aspect of it. If you need to practice anything, you need to do role plays or workshops, etc. And there are things that absolutely lend themselves to good training online, where it's more coaching, whether it's, follow-up, etc. There are definitely areas that do that. So what I would say is that we probably equipped our sellers and sales teams better, perhaps from a digital perspective of being able to approach that. We had to rethink how we did some of our classroom training in order to be able to do it virtually. And how that works. But there still is that, I would say, tussle between what works well in the classroom, what works well virtually, and how can we get the classroom training through? Because obviously there's always resources, costs involved, and T&E costs, not just the cost of the training. So.
Right. Kind of going off of that, or maybe even if, like getting back to what you were talking about before, like identifying skills gaps. How does your team identify and address skills gaps within the organization? That could be through what you were just talking about, like through doing some of the things through the digital lens or just in general. Like, how do you kind of approach that?
Um, so again, I'll tell you what I think is the kind of perfect way to do it, the nirvana that you would want to reach for it, and then what's actually happening in this organization. I always think that when you're identifying learning needs, again, it's that top down, bottom up approach. So we have to look for example, competency assessments. Absolutely has to be one of those kind of 3 data points or 4 data points that you would want to use. So you're looking at the individual seller's performance against a set of competencies, skills, knowledges, behavior, etc., that are particular to their role. So that's the first one. And then we get like a really nice map of what's happening there. And then after that, I would say you need that kind of informal comments from some of the more leadership team levels. What are they seeing within their teams? Where are they seeing the gaps? Where are they seeing the business moving that may actually then lead to some gaps where they need to fulfill them, or people to move into different roles. So that would be the second thing. And then the third thing I would always want to see is actually talking to the sellers. Now, in our organization, you could do focus groups because of the number. But voice of the customer, they are our customer at the end of the day. So I want to hear their feedback, what they're saying. And then if you had the luxury of having that fourth data point, it would be talking to the customers for us, because we would want to hear from them. What do they see when they meet their sales organization? Where are they seeing gaps? What could we do better? And then it's that task of aligning everything and trying to find, a common thread that we can then play the training into, the learning into, that's data driven, right? So it means that we've got a start point, a jumping off point, and we know where we want them to go as well. So that's the situation if we had the perfect scenario and the time and the resources to do it. What I would say, what's actually happening, there's been quite a big change this year and half of last year as well, is that we are now starting to do more formal assessments at a global level, which is great. And give the sales leaders the tools to look at a set of a framework of competencies, and rate their teams on it against proficiency levels. And the sellers can do that themselves as well, on the same framework. And then they come together to have that one-to-one conversation to discuss the results of it, and then define the learning path from there.
Yeah, wow, that's great, and I feel like so comprehensive, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to my next question, which is, you've talked a lot about that, like measuring, where people are at with their proficiencies, but how do you measure the overall effectiveness of your programs? And like, what are some of those, this is always a tricky question. What are some of those core KPIs? Do you have any that you report to kind of your supervisors?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the company that I work for, it's very data driven. Obviously, there are lots of levels of leadership. They absolutely want to see metrics, and they absolutely want to see the KPIs. And again, they should all be aligned with whatever our strategy is, as a business. So that gives us a really good indication of where we need to go. I would say that when we look at learning enablement metrics and KPIs, we operate on 3 different levels. So we have the most basic one, which is just regarding logistics of training, right? So did people show up that they were supposed to show up? Was the attendance correct? Did they complete the necessary number of hours, if that is applicable? Did they complete the feedback? Because that's really important to us as well. So that's the kind of basic level. The second layer is really, did they learn what they were supposed to learn from that learning and training? So we can look at that through knowledge assessments, through conversations with sales leaders, observations, ride-alongs. There's more of that external influence as well there. Or just simply doing like a knowledge retention app with it, or later on coming back to ask them further questions on it also. And then the final layer is that ultimately we want to see the results of that learning and training play out in the business, in the success of the seller and the success of the business generally. So it's a longer term plan, but it's things like, conversion rates within the pipeline. It is, really the size of the pipeline as well. That's a more short term measure. We work with a lot of long term projects here in this side of the business. So you may not see the results of any learning and training for 12 months because that's how long it could take for a project to get there. So conversion rates, are they being more successful at meeting their quotas? Now, obviously, with those metrics, we have to be careful because there's so many other factors that can play into it. So we look for trends in that one. We're not looking for absolute relationships. We're just looking for the trends in it.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. I feel like that gives you a good comprehensive, tying it always to the bottom line when you can. I'm a big fan of that, obviously, in like marketing.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
we need that to justify, why we should be running that program and to give the leadership team the confidence as to providing more budget when we need it to go even further for next time. So it's in our best interest to make sure that, that we're playing into that.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a successful case study or example of one of these kind of training initiatives that significantly impacted employee performance and contributed to the overall success of the organization, whether you're speaking about those KPI, those kind of 3 levels of KPIs you just talked about, or just another anecdotal experience?
So we're actually in the middle of, we're probably a third of the way through implementing a really big change for the sellers, which is the methodology that they are using to sell. And this is across all of the business as well. So for some of the sellers, it's been quite a big step change, and it will continue to be quite a big step change for them. And the reason for that was because we have really we looked at where we were going as a business and realized that our products and offerings needed to kind of change in line with the digitalization just generally. We did a lot of research, voice of our customer feedback to hear what was happening with them. And that shift meant a different approach to selling was needed. And so the decision was taken across the whole of the organization, not just within the division that I work for, that this is the way we were going to go. So I would say that we've been able to employ those 3 levels of metrics. We're starting to see payback in the business for the change in methodologies, but we've still got 2/3 of the population to actually fully train. So they're doing a combination of online learning, and then we're also pushing face-to-face classes, workshops as well, where we through every region and every business. So that's a huge logistical task to do that, so yes, that's where we are at the moment with that one. And as I said, I don't think we're probably 2 years away from completion on that.
Sure, but to already see, like you said, the impact of it, that's going to be encouraging for the next 2 years. If you've still got 2/3 of the staff to go and you've already got some significant changes, that's excellent. You've talked about how you do some face-to-face trainings and then also online. What role does technology play in your programs, and how do you leverage different tools and platforms to kind of enhance these experiences for employees?
Yeah, we've been quite, I would say, conservative with regards to technology where learning and enablement and training is concerned. We're getting a lot better. And again, like I mentioned before, I'm seeing some changes which are being driven at a corporate level, which are having a very positive impact on us. But technology comes at a cost. Right. We are complex organization, and systems have been put in place over the years. There was never one big strategic plan right from the beginning. Everything has kind of grown up. So we've got legacy systems that we need to think about how we would replace or not replace, as the case may be, and how that would work, and where's the budget coming from it, and what the implications are. There's so many things to think about that it moves at a very slow pace. And as I said, I'm seeing some good positive drive when it comes from top down. for example. So we're just about to start with a new sales enablement tool that's going to give us a great platform for learning enablement, and will mean we can move away from some of the legacy ones as well. So it's going to be a long implementation, lots of governance and rules to put in place and define, but hopefully should move us to the next level of that technology phase.
I feel like that's always a big challenge, especially at big organizations. It's a massive undertaking. So, but that's exciting that, it's
Oh,
there
for
and
sure.
kind of thinking forward too along those lines, just kind of generally speaking from, your experience, as learning and development programs have rapidly evolved over the past 5 years since COVID, really, what are some key takeaways that you've seen just like in general?
I think that some of the smaller bite-sized learnings are becoming far more popular.
Yeah.
And for us, for the sellers, it's kind of at the point at which they need it. So it's that right on time learning. They're going to visit a customer. They know that they may need to talk about a product or an offering that they just need a quick refresher on before they go into that meeting. It's things like that.
Yeah.
And then I would also say that obviously huge use of apps now, which are incredibly useful. And that means, again, while they're out on the road, and we do have to think about the sellers and they're traveling, how they can access that. They may not be in the best place for Wi-Fi, or they may not have data. How could we leverage that? If they're sitting on a plane for a long time, it's an ideal opportunity for them to do bits and pieces of learning, right?
The
So there's
Wi-Fi
that.
is never good.
Yeah, I know. It's so there's small things like that. I think that would make the difference, going forward. Um, yeah, I'm just trying to think of anything else. I think it's really more about giving them what they need, thinking about who the learners are as well, right? So we have the Gen Zs coming up, and their approach to learning is quite different. And needing that, very small chunks before they want to switch to something else. But encouraging them at the same time to sit for longer, to learn, to look at stuff. I think we've all become a slave to social media, and our attention span is so small now, less than a goldfish, that
Yeah.
we just want to move on to something different. And I think we have to relearn some of those old habits to be able to actually concentrate for longer periods of time and take in that information and let it digest and settle,
Yeah.
before we move on to our next Instagram page.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I actually just signed up for a course and I was so blown away. They sent a book and a workbook, and I was like, this is amazing and so different than any course I've taken in the last 10
Yeah.
years, which has just been online. And it's just like a quick little refresher marketing thing. But to be able to sit down and use a highlighter and write notes, I'm like, oh, this is, great. And
It's
I feel
right.
like I'm
You
actually,
feel like
but
you feel
yeah,
you feel like it's old fashioned.
yeah,
Yeah, and just going back to the new methodology that we've been, training the teams in the face-to-face classes, they have workbooks that they can take home, they can write their own notes and they take it home, and it's a bit of a novelty,
yeah,
so, but that doesn't have to be the case for everything. It just
right.
has to be where it's most appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think you've answered most of all of my questions, really. But my last one that I always ask everyone as kind of like a fun send off is, what advice would you give to those just stepping into a leadership role?
Oh, don't neglect your own learning and enablement. That's the biggest thing as well, is, we get so caught up with these roles and learning and teaching everybody else and supporting everybody else that we forget ourselves, as well. And that doesn't have to be, as I said, majorly courses. It could be just watching a TED talk. It could be, picking up a book. It could be reading an article, whatever that is. Don't forget about your own learning and development. And most importantly, as I have got a lot older, trust your instincts. There is so much. Your gut tells you so much that what is kind of not right and what is right. So those are the two pieces of advice I would give anybody, actually, not even in a leadership role.
Right. No, that's excellent. I love that. Thank you so much, Emma, for your time today and for that Wonderful, wonderful piece of advice as send off. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, Melissa.